busy things happening. That's always a good sign.
Do you want to maybe take the microphone
You probably know that this is the first Sunday in Advent, and that begins the liturgical year. This is like New Year's Day for the structure of the traditional church. The year begins with the first Sunday in Advent and goes all the way through the Sundays after Pentecost. And it's a logical flow if you stand back and look at it. It's a very logical flow. We're getting ready for the birth of that new Christ dimension within us. Not the arrival of something that's not already there, but the birth of our awareness of more of who we are, more of the power that we are. And of course, central to everything in all religions is the waning of the light and the coming of the light, the winter solstice, which celebrations of which have gone back for centuries and centuries before religions were ever founded. They're just part of our basic makeup, I think, that we recognize there's something very powerful about this time of year. Even now, I can feel the nights drawing in much earlier than they did, and it seems to be moving quickly. And that will happen right up until the 21st, of course. What we need is the ability to see the light we're seeking, to find the path out of all the holiday chaos we seem determined to create for ourselves. The truth is that we distract ourselves because we are frightened by the first hints of the new power that is to come. I have been doing some work. First of all, several of you mentioned when we were during our greeting time that you have read the piece I wrote for this month's Daily Word, and I'm delighted to know that resonated with, that I'm not the only one who found tiny bottles of perfume in my mother's drawer. So, thank you. I've been looking at some unpublished Charles Fillmore. There is a ton of stuff in the archives, which is now accessible, of course, over the web. And there were reasons. He wrote a great deal in the final years of his life. And after his death, there was a decision made not to publish most of it because it was, for that time, it was just too out there. He was really working on the idea of eternal life, really working on putting these principles, following these principles to their logical conclusions. And it's fascinating to read. I'm having a really good time and finding some nuggets that I just really love that, of course, I have never come across before. This is a quote from that manuscript. The thought that we as spiritual beings can control our own destinies and that we are even now making our lives what they are, at first instills absolute fear. You would think it's good news, there's good news. You're in charge of your own destiny. You are creating the life you live in. And the first reaction is, no, I'm not. Who me? No, I don't think so. And Mr. Fillmore's biblical reference, he always had a biblical reference, was to the story of Zechariah in the very first chapter of the Gospel of Luke. Now, this is going to be a longer Bible reading than I usually do, but I think it's interesting in terms of where we are today, where we find ourselves today. So this is Luke chapter 1, verses 5 to 13. In the days of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah. His wife was a descendant of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and regulations of the Lord. But they had no children, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were getting on in years. Once, when he was serving as priest before God and his section was on duty, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. Now at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. Now let's pause for a moment and set that scene, because it's very dramatic, I think. The temple in Jerusalem consisted of a very large courtyard, and at the end of it was a curtain that divided the courtyard from the Holy of Holies, the altar. And only priests could go back there, only one priest at a time. And as it says here, they're chosen by lot to go back, light the incense, do the offering, and then come back out to the people and conclude the service with the people. They simply waited until the priest returned. Then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will call his name John." Zechariah said to the angel, "How will I know that this is so? For I am an old man, and my wife is getting on in years." The angel replied, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you the good news. But now, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak, until the day these things occur." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondered at his delay in the sanctuary. When he did come out, he could not speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the sanctuary. He kept motioning to them and remained unable to speak. When the time of the service was ended, he went to his home. Now, on one level, I think we can identify with the people in the courtyard. You know, is this service ever going to end? Is he ever going to come out from behind that damn curtain? I've got a roast in the oven. I don't have time for this. You know, this is running late. You know how late it is. We all know what that's like. You know, in the presence of spirit, and yeah, that's very nice. But I've got stuff to do, things to do, places to be. Fillmore always identified the people with the thought people in our own minds. Every thought, he said, is like one of the Hebrew people, like in the Hebrew scripture. And I can certainly understand that, you know, quarreling and scurrying for attention and trying to get what they think is important. Our own thought people are not involved in this thing that's about to happen, the birth of new Christ awareness. And that scares them. The thought people that we deal with on a daily basis have nothing to do with this. This is way beyond that. And the response to that is always fear. But on a deeper level, I think we are totally Zechariah, going about life as we always have been, our duties, doing our work, doing what's expected of us, and sensing something missing. You know, that son that never happened, despite the fact that they obeyed all the laws and they were good and holy before God, they just never were able to have a child. And so there is that sense of something missing, and totally unaware that the birth of a new generation of spiritual awareness requires, before anything else, the slightest spark of faith. Faith is the central theme for the first Sunday in Advent, because everything begins with that spark of faith. It doesn't have to be a dramatic revelation. It doesn't have to be an angel standing before you, giving you news about what's going to be happening. It's just the size of a mustard seed, Jesus said. It's just being willing to believe, not even believing yet, but being willing to believe. That's what faith begins as. And then an angel appears to the right of the incense, calling us back to our spiritual purpose. That seed grows into an experience, a spiritual experience. It may not be a literal angel. It may be. I don't know what your meditations are like, but it is a response to that faith. It's a response to the faith we have allowed ourselves to feel and to claim for ourselves. Our thought people radiate all kinds of doubts, of course, but the angel insists it's all good news. Now, what about Zechariah being struck dumb? That's always interpreted, well, I won't say always, but as far as I know, it's always interpreted as a punishment for his lack of faith, that he would be struck dumb. This time, when I was working with it this week, it seems to me that it was a gift. It was a gift from the angel. Because we have a tendency to expend our energy with words, with talking. You know, we try to explain or defend ourselves because we're following this new path, we're believing this new possibility. People around us think we're crazy. We feel we have to justify ourselves to everybody. Or we try to talk ourselves out of the new possibility. We just try to, that ongoing dialogue inside is determined to keep us back in the safe zone that is familiar to them. Better we should just not talk for a while. Better we should just be with this spark of faith and let it be. Don't try to explain it. Don't try to share it. Don't try to justify it. Don't believe that you need somebody else's permission to trust that faith, to trust that spark of new awareness that is going to be growing and expressing through Christmas. So the world seems rather crazy right now, and we might think that the pressure of Christmas isn't helping. You know, this is an interesting year. The old Chinese saying that you live in interesting times. I think we've followed that perhaps a bit too much. But if you quiet those thought people in your head, insisting that this Christmas has to measure up to some unrealistic standard we've carried over from the past, you will hear another voice. It's a voice from our higher being, assuring us that our path is clear and our success is assured as we begin to play our own unique role in the drama that's unfolding. A drama of new awareness of the Christ presence we are, the holiness of our purpose, and the expression of that Christ presence, which choice by choice by choice becomes that new consciousness that Jesus calls the kingdom of heaven. This is another quote from that same writing of Charles Fillmore's. Our religious ideals and instincts are already prepared for the new way of life to be ushered in. We are simply to make ready for the Lord a people prepared for him by denying all lesser rules of action and turning wholeheartedly toward the light whose unfailing rays show the path that we must follow. That's a very simple and powerful statement, I think, that our job is to make ready, to quiet the thought people, to keep our focus on the spiritual possibility, so that when the birth comes, we're ready for it, we're eager for it. Now there will be many lesser rules of action trying to distract us this holiday season. Obligations of all kinds, of all sorts, presents, food, parties, everything that Christmas represents. But it will be important to remember that the only thing that matters is the birth itself, the spark of new light we are about to experience. If our focus stays clear and centered, this Advent will be much more than a time of buying and wrapping and cooking and decorating. It will be a time of joyful awareness and fearless willingness to embrace new possibilities, to embrace fully the second principle there, that we are the power of God in expression. In every way, we are the power of God, and our job is to continue the process of creation as we move forward into a new consciousness. It all begins with that spark of faith, and that spark is my wish to you as we enter this time of Advent. Many blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.